on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
When I started, things like having a dev editor, things like having good proofreaders, finding excellent cover artists, all of those tools that all the publishing houses use are available to you and to me.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello, yes, it's the Self-Publishing Show. Welcome along, I'm James Blatch.
And I'm Mark Dawson.
So you are, and we are recording these back-to-back for people who are closely observing. I have changed the colour in the background, though. It throws people off a little bit. But you look identical.
I always look the same. Slightly less hair. Actually, I saw some pictures of me yesterday. I was looking through my phone with my daughter from 10 years ago. And she was like, "Who's that, Daddy?" I went, "That's me." No, it isn't.
Well,
that's because of you. Is the answer.
Yeah,
I look
exactly.
much better in those days.
When we started the podcast, I don't think you had a beard, did you? Or did you?
Now and again. But no, I've had this probably for about a year now.
I think you've had it longer than that. I'm going to have to look
Possibly.
back at the podcast. I think it's become a bit of a fixture. I mean, it's slightly trimmed today. It has been bushy in that.
Yes, I had a beard trim before the Kindle Storyteller Awards on Monday. I thought I'd better.
At your coiffeurs.
It looked like Father Christmas.
Yeah, well, time's coming. Well, that's good. And I think it's still, I guess, there's still the whole Shoreditch, what are they called, hipsters thing going on. Is that your thing? I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I mean, Shoreditch hipsters would have great big beards.
Yes.
And I don't have a great big beard, but no. Anyway, I don't live in Shoreditch anymore. No, there's no such thing as a Salisbury hipster.
No, Salisbury priests and monks. Okay, look, this is episode 198. We're 2 away from the big 200. We have Jeff Wheeler on today, who we're going to hear from in a few minutes. So Jeff was right at the beginning, even before the beginning, really, of indie books. It's interesting to talk to him, and that's what we do, talk about how he developed from going to basically finding a way of selling books online before Kindle and everything else, to being a good online marketer now. He's living the life that he loves, absolutely loves being away from the 9 to 5, writing, I think he says maybe 3 or 4 books a year, something like that, and makes good money from it, which is always a good story. So Jeff's coming up in a minute. I did promise I was going to update people on The Last Flight, the first book, The Last Flight, drum roll. I'll tell you, really, so we're recording this, where are we? October the something? 17th of October at the moment. My watch just died. And I have sent it out to 4 or 5 very carefully selected beaters. Heard a little slice back from 2 of them who've, in fact, I'll say Nathan Coops is one of them, Nathan Coop is one of them, who is
Van Coops,
yeah, who's a pilot as well. So hoping he'll pick up something on that front. And he's been very positive and also given me some great sort of first-time novelist advice on something I'm doing at the moment now. So having done the revision process with Jenny, which was taking the sort of developmental revisions, which I did find quite laborious. Every time I approached it, I do find that quite difficult, having in your head different parts of the story at the same time, and had to really be methodical about when I went through to make sure that it didn't give yourself more problems. And I didn't particularly enjoy that. But having done that and got to the end of it, I felt relieved. That took longer. You were quite right. You said to me, this will take longer than you think. It did take longer than I thought. And it's a long book as well. And I'm now going through it, just basically polishing, rewriting some sentences, taking the clunky "he walked over there" to "he opened the curtains," or just that sort of thing, just to make it flow a bit better, which I have to say I'm really enjoying. I'm getting 5,000 words a day done like that, revising them rather than and sometimes I've done, my best day has been 12,000 words through. So I'm a quarter of the book through at the moment. It is still, and I am also trimming it a bit as well. So it's down to about 195 at the moment, and hopefully will become less than that. And it's also for the first time going through it and starting to feel that this is now in shape. It's sort of there now. It's where all that work has started to show me a book that you can turn the page and make sense. I'm really, really excited about. And I think I went through, we always do this, don't we? I mean, I do this. I don't know if you do. You go through periods of thinking it's awful, periods of thinking it's quite good, and then it's awful. And at the moment, I'm just sort of being a little bit more moderate about it, thinking this is a good first novel, where it is. But what I've done really exciting this week, I've had this idea for my second novel banging around. It's not the moon thing, that's just a side project. Based on one of the characters, an American character that's going to be set in Edwards, and it'll be a prequel to this book. And yesterday, or the day before, finished it yesterday, but the day before, went for a walk, not thinking about it, came back and outlined it. And I'm so happy about the outline. And I've been thinking about it for some time, actually, thinking I know how it starts. I sort of know how it ended, but I really didn't know how the story was going to work. And I just sat there and I'm really excited about the outline. Going to have that done. Going to flesh that out a little bit more, working on the character arcs now. And it's about 2,000 word description at the moment, so that in November I can use NaNoWriMo, and you've got to keep me honest in November because we're together a bit in Vegas. I've got to try and get a big chunk of the draft done, 50,000 words, and also try and make sure this book is like 75 to 100,000 words, not 200,000 words, which I'm thinking about at this stage.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you'll have a better idea of the flow of it, just having done it once. So you won't. It won't be. You won't lose control like you clearly have done with this time.
Some books are long.
But they are long. I mean, I think this is probably. I don't know until I read it, but I think it might be too long. But I could be wrong. It's not really my genre. But no, it's. This is my favorite part of the process as well. Is the kind of the final polishing and tweaking and changing is quite fun. And because you can see the end now, you're definitely within striking distance of being able to upload it, hit publish, and then see what happens. Get your first reviews, going to get your first bad reviews, and get lots of good ones hopefully. So, and make some money. Amazon will send you a check or will pay into your account, which is a fun situation to be in. So it'll be good. I'm curious as to how it will launch. We'll have to think about how we launch it. Lucky you know me, really, aren't you?
Yes.
I can give you some advice.
So on my list is to watch some of the 101 sessions in more detail than I've done in the past, particularly the launch sequence and the launch countdown. I need to do quite a bit of work on my email list, which is entirely set up for pre-launch at the moment. An author who has no books. So I need to have a way of onboarding people at the end of the book. I need to have a way of onboarding people towards purchasing a book.
Well, one thing I like a lot, which I haven't tried yet, which I think is a very, very good idea, is what Lucy Score did in after we spoke to her in Ninc. Lucy is a student of the ads course with her husband and is doing extremely well now. And she, just to prove that there's no exclusivity on good ideas, she's come up with an idea that I hadn't thought of before, and I think is brilliant. So instead of a novella or a novel as the reader magnet, she uses epilogues, exclusive epilogues. So it doesn't have to be very long, could be like 1,000 words. But if you get someone right at the end of a book and you say, look, there's more to this story, it's not kind of critical to the story because you don't want to piss off readers who don't want to get it. But if you say there's a another scene that you might like to read, I think that would be extremely attractive as a magnet. And I think she told me, I could be getting the numbers wrong here, but I think she went from 5,000 subscribers to 30,000 subscribers just using that method in 6 months or something along those lines, which is ridiculous. So I'm going to do that with one of the books I've got coming up. I will write a short epilogue and put that out there. It's a very good idea, I think.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I mean, the what I'd planned is to have, because I think I mentioned this before, that there are a couple of crashes in the book. So I was going to do the air accident report from 1966. I have to say the government in the UK, I think it's the third time now I've gone back to the National Archive to get the original copies of some accident reports. They're so difficult to actually, you pay the money, but they still don't seem to actually produce the work they're supposed to do. Enough of that though. So I want to make that an authentic, and I've been Googling how to age the paper and then sort of scan it, with tea, yeah, exactly, and light and tea. Another option for me, because the second novel will be a prequel, is I could do the first couple of chapters, because I've obviously now I'm doing the prequel, I've stuck something in there. It's just a very slight allusion to this character having a reason for being in the UK. Things didn't go well for him in the States, just basically oblique like that. But I suppose I could put at the end, so if you want to find out why Red Runson was in the UK and what happened to him download it.
You could try that. Yeah, that's a good idea too. There's lots of options. One of those two would be, well, those three ideas would be worth testing, and you can do that. You can test it, see how it works.
Yeah.
Monitor what your signups are like in terms of the percentage, the conversion percentage from copies sold to subscriptions over 2, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then do the one that gets the highest conversion. That's what you go for.
And these are going to be, I think, for you and for Lucy, and I've spoken to a couple of other people in my interviews recently. These are good mailing list signups. These are not people after a free book who don't know you. These are people who've read one of your books and want to know more. So that's a good.
No, they're the best.
That's a step up in.
Organic is always the best. People who've read the book, you can't get better than those subscribers. Those are the gold. They're gold dust. So that's why you want to get that right.
Yeah. So I've got a few more days of polishing, which I'm enjoying. That sounds a bit rude, and hear back from the beaters, and hopefully they won't say anything too dramatic. Then Jenny wants to have a chat through with me on feedback from the beaters, we'll discuss together. She's, by the way, doing a brilliant course on revising your book. So she's basically taking a lot of stuff we've been through together. I think you had a little sneak preview of this course material.
Excellent.
Yeah, so she's very, very good. And we're going to put this out as a standalone course, and it's happening really quickly. So it won't take too long to be out there for you. Haven't thought of a price yet, but it'll be a lower end price for this, but something very useful for people on how to turn your book from good to great, how to really make those page-turning, compelling stories, which we all want. So that's where I am. So it's exciting. I mean, I still think, obviously, I'm going to be going to 20 Books Vegas with people saying, "Where's your book, dude?"
Probably.
But this time, I don't think I'm pretty certain.
I'll tell you what you should do.
Get to March.
Are you speaking on stage?
No, I'm not this year.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, what we could do is we could launch it live on stage.
We could launch it in your session.
I could bring it at the end of my keynote and we could hit publish live on stage.
Yeah, but where are we?
You got about 3 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. Depends how.
3 weeks. I could write a novel in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I know you could. Yes, it depends on the beta readers, really. I can get through my polishing in that time, but it depends on them. And like I say, they've got a unpolished 200,000 word book to read, and it's very kind of them to read it. I mean, I have said to Nathan, beginning, middle, and end would be great, to give me the general feedback. But I think a couple of others are plodding through it, hopefully racing through it, because they can't stop reading it.
That's the idea.
I hope they haven't got to the sex scene. Right.
I had a fun thing the other day. A reader of mine, an advanced reader, a guy called Neil, who was in the police, is in police surveillance.
Was he? What, Sting?
Yeah.
Andy.
He did a couple of quite well-known cases. He worked on the Levi Belfield case and a couple of others. So he's got some of these are fairly nasty cases. Anyway, he's been a very helpful beta reader for me for a while, and my example, I don't think this is bigging myself up too much, inspired him to write himself. And he sent me this book a while ago, and I read it. I'll be honest, not expecting much, and it was effing good, right? I was like, this is he can write, he really can. Did the scene, it was really good. So I told him that and offered to help him if I could. And then he had a second book come out, and I just did a little post into my Facebook group for my readers, and I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 of them went and bought it. And the reviews they've come back, they're like, I was up until 3 o'clock last night, I couldn't put it down. It's really good. One guy said, it's as good as Milton. I'm like, I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about that. So no, Neil's doing really well. So that's, it just goes to show that's that kind of marketing.
Yeah, he's self-published.
Word of mouth. Yeah, he is, although he's published through two, basically a small press, which is comprised of two people who've taken all of our courses. I don't know who they are. They may be listening, but I think they've done a pretty decent job with Neil's first book, and looks to me like his second book might be pretty good as well. So, he's making some money, and not tons yet, but he's only got 2 books out, but well, 1 book and a pre-order. So yeah, it's nice to see. So he's kind of seen what I've done, started writing himself, and he's got a lot of experience. I think he may even have been ex-military before he went into the police.
Okay.
So he's very, when he writes about surveillance, it feels exactly like this is how it is.
Wow. Great.
So he's called Neil Lancaster, and his second book is called Going Dark, and Tom Novak is his protagonist. So if you're interested in espionage thrillers and you've read all of mine, then you go and check out Neil. So I think he's got some talent.
So that's amazing that just to mention to your Facebook group did that for him. What will it do when you mention my book to your Facebook group and put it in your newsletter?
I don't do newsletters, I'm afraid, but I'll certainly do. I'll certainly mention it in the Facebook group.
You do emails. I'm one of your readers. I get your emails.
But I've never ever recommended anybody else in the email ever.
Oh, I see. You don't do recommendations in your emails. Okay.
But Facebook is different. I'll definitely give you a shout out.
Well, it's the first time for everything. Also, it's the other thing about that. So you should never say never again.
Some things that I would never say yes to.
Good. Okay, well, that's where I am. I did put an alternate cover idea into the one of the forums, into the Genius Forum, the 101 group, a couple of days ago. Stuart Bache did a fantastic job. After the photo shoot, we had lots of different angles and photos, and he put together an alternate cover, which I thought looked great. And I completely understood a lot of the feedback was that the first one was very good, had a real grip to it, sold the story and the era and everything else clearly. And the second one, whilst it was a striking cover, didn't necessarily convey those key elements that you want to empower your reader with. Give your reader that knowledge, potential reader that knowledge. And so that was a really good lesson in understanding why what process goes into making a good cover decision. And it isn't necessarily the striking picture or what you consider a good cover. It's a cover that's going to work in a particular circumstance.
Yeah, I like the second one. I thought the second one with a change in, I think the type was quite right, but I thought it was really good. But then someone said why they'd chosen the first one, and it was a good point. It was, it could have been, unless the equipment that the guys you were wearing looks like it could be modern.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't necessarily know it's from the 60s. So I think in that instance, it made more sense to stick with the previous one, which is very good as well.
Yeah. And of course, there's no reason in 2 years to do a little refresh and a relaunch of the book and have a new cover on it. And that will be there. We'll see how that goes. Good. So this is an exciting point in my journey, Mark. In my journey. I'm having a journey.
You're not getting, your journey doesn't get mentioned in my Facebook group. I'll talk about your publication, but we don't do journeys.
It's not about the destination. It is sort of about the destination. Good. Well, I'll do some proper thank yous to everyone it's been like giving birth this for the community, isn't it? It's been a laborious exercise, lots of gas and air and screaming, but eventually we'll get there and it's coming soon. Good. Okay, now let's talk about somebody who has a shed load of books out. And as I said earlier, started right at the very beginning. We were going to talk about world building. That was kind of what Jeff and I talked about in advance. But the conversation really was about his progress from just trying to find a way of writing and selling stories online to living the life he's living now as a result of the sort of digital revolution. He's been there through all of those phases. It was a compelling talk just about that. So that's what we're talking to Jeff about. And Mark and I will be back for a quick chat off the back of this interview.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Jeff, welcome to the Self-Publishing Show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, I reckon we can divide up people in self-publishing who I talk to on this show in two big groups. And one is the group that sort of were doing it right in the early days before everyone else had latched onto it, and those who've joined in the last couple of years. You are very much in the former. I think you have very early self-publishing experience, do you not?
I do. My very first was in 1999, and it was a disaster. But that was my first taste of printing actually a hardcover children's book, and it failed miserably. But then I tried it again a couple of years later, and that didn't work either. So yeah, I did it quite a few times before things seemed to work out.
Okay. Well, look, let's get the skinny on Jeff. You better give us a potted history of your publishing career.
Well, I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I was in middle school. Reading fantasy just was something that it by my imagination. And so I spent most of my high school years just writing for fun. I wrote 5 novels while I was in high school, all terrible, but it was something that I was passionate enough to stop playing video games to do something else. And it was while I was in college. I was a history major studying medieval English history, actually. And I just kept writing on the side, took every creative writing class that I could. And but I got a career at Intel Corporation, a tech company, and had to
We've all
pay the
heard of
bills.
Intel.
Yeah, I had to
Yeah,
pay the bills
yeah.
and things like that. But I kept writing on the side, and it would maybe squirrel away one night a week, or I could write my stories. And after being with Intel for 21 years, I finally decided to retire early and pursue my dream of being a full-time author, which I've been doing ever since then.
So, I mean, you made that last bit sound easy. You retired early. Obviously, you did perhaps some financial planning around this, and but you really wanted to change careers. You wanted this to be something that brought in some money and not just an evening hobby.
I did, and when I got my first publishing deal with Amazon Publishing, I didn't jump ship right away. I was very meticulous, a financial planner. I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to evaporate in one year. So I signed a 6 book deal with them. The first 3 books I'd already self-published, and I let them remarket it and repackage it and change the covers and really make it look a lot better, audiobooks, that kind of thing. But they also bought the next 3 books that I hadn't finished writing yet. And so I waited until those 3 books were done and in the pipeline before I said, this is, it's been more than a year, more than 2 years, more than 3 years. Okay, I think this is sustainable. And I talked to them and said, if I write full time, I can produce 3 books a year, is what my guess was. And I've been able to do between 3 and 4 books a year since then. So that made a lot of difference, having some volume behind it as well.
So there was an overlap, a safety overlap for you. That must have been a tiring, busy period for you.
Oh, very much. And my wife and I have 5 kids. So
Wow.
I was not just thinking about being a dad and being an employee, but thinking about how am I going to pay for their college, in the future. So I really wanted to make sure I wasn't jumping the gun and being too excited, because I know some author friends who quit their jobs right away. But I said, no, let's make sure that this is going to be a safe path. And I've never regretted that decision. And it has really worked out well.
Okay, well, let's go to that first series that you eventually sold to Amazon. You wrote the first 3 then. So had you been writing and experimenting in different genres? Have you always been in the same genre?
When I was in high school and college, I wrote thrillers and some historical novels. But I really decided my first love was fantasy. And I thought I could write something new. Well, basically, what was happening is when I was trying to publish my Muirwood series, a lot of fantasy that was coming out at those times was Game of Thrones, things that was very dark. Grimdark was becoming more and more popular, and I was really wanting to harken back to the days of Terry Brooks and the authors like C.S. Lewis that had inspired me. But there just wasn't a lot being published. It just seemed like everything was chasing after the dark, gritty fantasy. And I thought, well, that's what's being published. That's what everybody's writing to. But I really like what my publisher ended up calling entry level fantasy, the things that would entice a young reader or even older readers like myself to reminisce about those days again. And so I wrote what I'm passionate about and things that I cared about. And it was so rewarding to see that the market for that still existed and that the readers were hungering for that kind of writing to become popular again. So I was super happy that the audience hadn't completely abandoned the field,
Yeah.
when I got into it.
Well, of course, the books you reference there are, very famous books that lots of us have read at least one of those series, particularly C.S. Lewis. But that's, I would imagine, in this day and age, quite a challenging genre to write into, because who are you aiming your book at? 10 to 14-year-olds, in which case they're quite difficult to market to, or I mean, adults do read, of course, those fantasy books as well, but who are you aiming it at?
Well, when I was creating the Muirwood series, I was my the target market that I was going for was moms and their daughters, right? Moms who love to read and wanted to share books with their kids, yet at the same time felt that the fare that was coming out was a little bit rougher than they would want their kids to read. So I thought, well, let me make something that both could enjoy. And what has absolutely astounded me is, I just got an email last week from a 79-year-old gentleman in Italy who loves my books, and I found that it wasn't just moms and daughters, but I have every demographic from 10-year-olds to 80 or 90-year-olds. And so I think it was the themes that I was writing about. It just was not limited to what I thought it was, and how I found like that really the desire to write the kind of books that I like to read, that I wanted to read, that I wish there was more of, appealed to a lot larger audience than I imagined originally.
So you're at Intel at this point, and you sit down to write the first. Did you plan this to be a series at the time that you started writing?
Absolutely. When I come up with story ideas, it's usually in a 3-book story arc. So and I know publishers like series too. They don't want just one book. They'd like to see a series, but not necessarily 20 books in a series. So I thought a trilogy would probably be about the right form factor for it. So when I conceived the plot, I had kind of all three legs of it together. But what I did is I went back and I reread a lot of the classics that have stood the test of time. Things like Jane Austen's works and Ellen Montgomery and Frances Hodgson Burnett, books that I've always enjoyed. And I just said, well, why have these books survived for hundreds of years? What is it about them that is appealing to readers, and what can I learn from that? And I've learned since that a lot of authors do this. We analyze when something really popular comes out. We go and take a look and say, what was it? What was it about this book that entranced readers so much? Like when Harry Potter came out, I was one of the first people on board. It's like, well, what is she doing that is making these stories so compelling? And so I like to reverse engineer and just kind of understand what were the touching points that really appealed to me and to other readers. And so I kind of immersed my mind in a lot of these classics just to see what were those themes and things that drew me in, and tried to just try to touch on some of those same themes, not copying their stories, but just touching on those themes that just resonate with the human heart.
So have you cracked the code?
Well, I think obviously I have, with 25 books out
Yeah,
right now, and hitting the bestseller charts a couple of times. It's like, okay, I think those human themes transcend time,
yeah.
and so yeah, I think I have, but you're gonna have to find that out for yourself, like
Yeah.
like we all have to do, right?
Well, I was thinking you could teach us all. This is why Jane Austen and J.K. Rowling have enduring qualities. I mean, they're all great books, we should say, and Pride and Prejudice. I think I probably didn't understand what a great book it was until about 20 years ago. I was probably in my 30s when I read it again and thought it's the most brilliant, witty. I mean, it's a comedy, effectively, that book. It's dressed up as this romance and exploration of embarrassment and pride, as she says, but it's a comedy and it's brilliantly written. So there's something that works. Anyway, you just happened to mention one of my favourite books. So you're planning this out. You're still at Intel at this stage, and your plan is now, having experimented and enjoyed your writing, to try and coalesce it into something commercial. So this stage, is this in '99 still?
No,
No,
no, that
so
was
that was your early venture, wasn't it? Yeah.
it was. So this was like 2007, 2008,
Okay, so still very early, pre-Kindle, I think.
pre-Kindle.
Yeah, but so this is a commercially orientated plan. You were thinking at this stage, this will be something I publish.
Absolutely. And I had a plan for, okay, here's the agents that I'm going to solicit this to. These are the publishers that I think, I think might be interested in this. And I queried over 40 different agents. And out of all of them, I got a couple nibbles. One of them actually wanted to see the whole manuscript, and I thought, this is it, right? I've made it. I got my ticket. And then after waiting months and months, I got the rejection. After they'd read the sample, the first 3 chapters, then the whole manuscript. And they said no. And I was at that point where, well, what do I do? I've tried 40 some different agents. Maybe I should consider self-publishing, printing it in a physical book through like CreateSpace. Kindle had come out by this point. And I thought, well, maybe I should do that. But I really decided to just sit on it and just to keep writing the next book and then the next book. And I stopped pursuing self-publishing as well as agents until I finished all 3 of those Muirwood books. And it was interesting because as this was happening, it's when the platforms were being invented for self-publishing. And so by sitting on it, I was waiting for that almost for the market or the industry to evolve and to be at that tipping point.
For the technology to catch up
with what was happening.
Yeah, you needed the technology to catch up with your ambition.
So that's absolutely what happened. And the funny thing is, because Amazon bought CreateSpace, because I'd been looking at them independently, and then Amazon bought them. And because I had signed up for their newsletter or something, I got an email from them saying, hey, we're offering a discount to self-publish, both Kindle and print for this amount. And I looked at that and I talked to my wife about it and said, doesn't cost that much. I mean, people like friends and family want to read the book. Maybe I should just put it out there for family and friends and see what happens. So I wrote them back and I said, well, if this is your discount for 1, would you give me a discount for 3? Because I have 3 books written. And they said yes. And they gave me even better deal. And so my wife and I talked about it. We tried all these things, said, let's just try it. And so we did. And I still have those versions of the book, and they don't look as good as the new versions do. But I remember getting them in my hands for the first time. It's like, now I have, the complete book. But now how do I tell people about it? Right? Isn't that the next question people have? It's like, what do you do next? Well,
let me just dwell on that for a moment, because I guess what was working against you at that stage really was that self-publishing was very closely aligned with vanity publishing in people's minds. And it must have been in your mind as well, thinking this is a real fallback. If I can't get published, I fall back to this. And it's like a second choice. I can feel the hesitancy, but inspired and insightful of you to have pushed that to one side and said, let's do this.
Well, I had tried it before. I had, published a couple of books before, but what kept giving me encouragement is every time, family members or people had read the book, they said, I want to share this with 5 other people. And I would say no, because I didn't want to lose, I didn't want to send them a Word document that could get, taken away. And so I just kept saying no. But I'd share it with just friends and with family. And it was finally some feedback from a high school friend who I had, reacquainted with on Facebook, and said, Jeffrey, you're still writing. And she asked me for a copy of my Muirwood series. And I'd only been done with the first 2 books by that point. And she just inhaled them and was like, I want to share this with people. And it's like, okay, this is somebody I haven't talked to in 20 years, and they love it. And that gave me some encouragement, and that maybe others, maybe strangers would like it too, that it's not just family saying, good job, Jeff, you're doing a good job, but that other people would want to see it. And I wouldn't know unless I let it out there into the world, that the traditional publishers didn't want it. And they were the gatekeepers. They stopped things from going forward. I said, well, we have these new technologies now that at least make it possible. And let's see what happens. And that's a story too of what happened after that, after it came out into the wild, because it didn't happen. Success did not happen overnight.
Okay, well, we'll come on to that in a second. So I'm just interested also in the CreateSpace model at that point, because I came into CreateSpace much later, not long before it got morphed into KDP Print on Demand, I guess last year. And at that point, it was simply the mechanism for creating your paperback, and it would be sold and you'd be charged on demand, whatever, £5.40, whatever per copy, and you'd make a profit on that, a royalty on that. But in your day, you're talking about a sort of price that you were being charged to create the book. And it wasn't quite as integrated as it was when I came to it.
Yeah, they charged you for layout design. They charged for, coming up with a cover. They kind of they were a full service,
Right.
and right now I would never use a full service platform. You'd go hire your own artist, but I didn't know that
Yeah.
at the time, and so I was just looking for the whole bundle of what's the least expensive way I could get the book into a physical form on an ebook form so that people, I could at least share it with people and just see what would happen with that. But what I've learned now, I didn't even know about dev editors and other kind of things that professional authors use, and I wish I had known, because I would have hired a dev editor.
So did you
um,
have
I,
any editing?
I just had editing that I had gotten through uh, some of the network that I had, just friends that were English majors and
Okay.
things like that. But there were there were so many typos and so many problems which really exist in the self-publishing sphere. Mine had all of that in it, and but thankfully the story was strong enough that people kept reading even though they found the mistakes. And I really believe that powerful storytelling can overcome a multitude of sins.
Yes. Well, it reminds me of T.S. Paul, who we've had on this podcast in the past, and his early books, by his own admission, were littered and badly done, and he didn't know what he was doing. But the stories are gripping and page turning, and it didn't seem to stop him in his tracks. But he's done everything wrong and got it right, and yet got it incredibly right. An amazing guy. Okay, so you just hinted at the fact that you went ahead with this deal, you got the discount from CreateSpace and Amazon, and you uploaded everything. And then, I guess, like lots of people in those early days, upload it, fold your arms, wait for the money to come in. It didn't quite happen.
No, no, it didn't happen. But I mean, I got reviews, and that was good. There were the family and the friends, but the sales were very small. And like everyone else, how do you find your way in this market? And so it went through for about a year, and just picking up a couple readers here and there. It was definitely not paying for itself at that point. And I hit probably one of my lowest points in December, almost a year after it had been out in the market. And I got an email from a fan in Australia, um, who said, "I love this Muirwood series. There's so many typos in it. And would you mind if I just sent you these typos so that you could fix it, so that other readers in the future maybe won't stumble over these like I did?" And I said, "Oh, that's so gracious of you. Thank you. Send it." And I got it. And it was like 90 in each book, between 90 and 100 in each book. And I spent my Christmas break, from Intel. I had vacation at the end of the year, and I spent my whole Christmas break fixing those things. And that's when the self doubt just pounded on my head, like, why are you doing this? You've had this out, and don't we all have that sometimes? That self doubt that just, I call it the imposter syndrome. Like, who are you to think that people could like it? And every book on successful people that I'd ever read said that you hit those walls where you're just like, I just want to quit. I want to quit. And it's just past that wall that success comes. And I'd heard that story enough times that I'm like, wow, this is my wall. It's like, what am I doing? And I said, no, I'm going to put the best product out there that I can. I'm going to write the best stories that I can. I even started writing my next series. Like, I'm just going to try. I'm going to keep writing because I have to tell stories. That's just part of who I am. And it was literally within the next, like, 1 month later, that KDP kind of came into existence. And they sent out an email saying, hey, if you make your book exclusive, you know how it works. If you make your book exclusive on our platform, we'll let you give it away for free for so many days. Do you want to give it a try? And I remember sitting in my office at Intel when that happened. And I said, what do I have to lose? So I did. I'm going to give away the first book for like 2 days or something. And because I had a trilogy out, and because it was so new and there weren't a lot of other fish in the sea at that point, over 10,000 people downloaded that book during that time. And I started getting, like, reviews started showing up, and I could just tell things were changing. And I said, what is going on? And I went back to my KDP dashboard, and I still remember I took a screenshot of it that day, because it floored me so much. I could hardly speak. I saw the number, 10,000 this, and I couldn't speak, and I ran to the kitchen, and I grabbed my wife, because I still couldn't speak. I couldn't articulate the numbers I had seen. It's like, is this a typo? I just gestured, like, come, and she looks at it, and she's like, oh my goodness, what is this? And so those 10,000 sales made people want to go look at number 2 and number 3, because the book was there. And as you know, binge reading is a thing, and readers love not having to wait for the next book in the series to come out. And so they started gobbling up book 2 and 3. And I said, wow, if this works, let me give all 3 of them away. And during the next cycle. And I did. And I think I gave away over 100,000 copies of those books. And and then the reviews were just pouring in. And then the sales started coming in, which paid for everything. It's like, okay, now I'm profitable at least. The books are starting to make money. And it was at that time that I came on the radar screen of Amazon Publishing, which had just a few months before created their fantasy and science fiction imprint called 47 North. And so the rise of sales, the rise of reviews attracted their attention. And they had just staffed this group. And I was one of the very first authors that they reached out to. And they said, hey, you've got this Muirwood series. We're interested in that, but are you writing anything else? And I said, yes, I've got another trilogy underway. And that's when I signed the deal. And I think they thought that once they republished Muirwood, that because I'd given away so many copies, that basically there was no legs left in it. And so, but that was absolutely not the case. Once they repackaged it and had audio and everything else together, it took off even faster than the second series that came out. And it was just a breakaway success for them, and really helped prove that there was a market for Amazon Publishing to do fantasy.
That deal you did with them, did you hesitate about that just because of the royalty, the sort of, I guess, was it the same in those days? You would have been on 70% from simply self-publishing, and then the deal with them would have been different?
I can't talk about the deal just because it's part of my contractual terms, but I didn't suffer with that deal at all.
Okay.
It was a tremendously rewarding deal. And the hesitation I had was, my books aren't going to be in traditional bookstores, right? I think a lot of authors go, well, I can't go to Powell's, or I can't go to Barnes and Noble. I can't go, and I'm not going to find my book on a shelf. And you can, that does happen. But I also realized that Amazon is an enormously big bookstore, and having a front row seat at that bookstore has got to be worth something too. So there was some pros and some cons, because I wanted a hardcover edition. There's the things that I wanted that I didn't get, but I don't regret it for a second, because of their ability to reach individual readers and to find statistically which readers are most likely to be interested in my books. Like, oh, you like C.S. Lewis and Terry Brooks. Well, you might like Jeff too. And it turned out to be just tremendously successful.
Yeah, I guess when you're considering a deal, you can look at a traditional house and the distribution lines they have that we can't access into the shops, and whether that's important to you at the cost of what they offer you back. But with Amazon, well, they have pretty good distribution lines, and they control the algorithms. Although Mark pointed out to me the other day, it's quite separate within Amazon, the imprints. They're just as puzzled about how the algorithm works as we are on the outside. But anyway, they're clearly on the inside of Amazon, which I guess is helpful and something to consider when you're looking at a deal. So where are you now, Jeff? You did a 6-book deal with Amazon, 47 North initially with that series.
I did. And I know a lot of other authors, once they had that deal, they knew they could go to traditional publishers and find options there. I chose to stay. And I have not regretted that decision, because I've been one of their top authors since then. they haven't wanted everything that I've done. So for some of my series, like for my King Fountain series, I wanted to do some standalone novels just because I thought my readers would like it, and they weren't interested in doing those standalones. So I continue to self-publish those. And I have had some of my audiobooks picked up by other companies uh, Podium have come and offered me to do audiobooks for some of the books that I've self-published. And so I'm very much a hybrid where I do some of my own things where I can keep the higher royalty percentages and take advantage of the Amazon algorithms, because if somebody finishes the series, it will recommend to them one of the ones that I've self-published, and I think it works out pretty well for that. I've had opportunities to have had agents reach out to me now, but I still don't have an agent, because I think that what I have right now is working very well for the career that I want. And I don't like going on book tours. I don't need to do things like that. I really like going to the few Comic Cons that I go to and the few events that I speak at. I like the balance that this gives me, and the time I get to spend with my family is very different than a lot of other top name authors that have to be on the road a lot during the year. And I don't have to do that. And I get to write 3 books a year, and it works out really well.
Well, those agents should have snapped you up when they had their chance a few years ago.
I've had some reach out and ask if I had talked to them. And I looked at my log and it's like, yeah, I did reach out to you. And yeah, they don't feel good about it now, but it's still good to have connections with an agents. And that's still how most books get into Amazon publishing today, is through the agented means. The timing, like I said, the when this happened in my career couldn't have been better. It didn't feel very good waiting for the technology to catch up, but I definitely appreciated being on the front lines when KDP really took off.
You were there. You were there at the coalface. Well, I think that's really interesting, and I think probably it's symptomatic of a change that's coming about. I think the very good writers with very good commercial books are increasingly going to see the financial advantage of self-publishing. And so whilst there'll always be people writing books that aren't going to make a huge amount of money, and then literary agents will quite rightly say, well, we're not going to take you on, they don't realize the competition that self-publishing is now posing them. They need to be, they're still lecturing authors about how to write your correct query letter, and you should send 80 of these out. And I don't think they realize the game is changing, that they should be chasing writers now, people like you, slipping through their fingers at an early stage. If you were to do a deal now, you'll do what Bella Andre did, which is you'll turn your laptop around, show your spreadsheet and say, well, look, this is what I'm making a month. So what can you offer me? And that's a very different conversation from a new author, unpublished, who will take anything that's thrown at them and sign a contract. But that's my hobby horse. I'll get off it now. Okay, so can you give us an idea? I'm not going to delve into the figures and, like you say, confidentialities, etc. But in terms of your career, your commercial success as a writer, how does that compare to what you were earning, for instance, at Intel? So on, have you replaced that income and gone a lot more than that?
Definitely, I went higher than what I was making while I was in Intel, and that was part of the decision making that I saw when those numbers were matching and then exceeding. I said, I don't need to stay now. As any other author will tell you, there's self-employment tax, and there's all these additional expenses that you have to do to run your own business. And so that's part, insurance is really expensive. So those benefits that you have with a company, you've got to make sure that, are you making enough money to be able to recreate those things? But I've definitely been very blessed to be able to write at the cadence that I do, and have a publisher that can find those people all over the world. And now with the international rights and things coming into play too, it's definitely more than made up for it, and is worth the headache. But there's definitely a lot of headache with the taxes and those things that have to be taken into consideration.
Sure. Well, congratulations. That's great. A great success story. And just to bring us bang up to date, I think you've got 20 plus books under your belt now.
I do. My latest book came out 3 weeks ago, and it's the first book in that series that hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. My King Fountain series has been my best-selling series, and so with the newer one, I didn't have as many readers, but that's quickly changing. And by book four, it's now risen to those same levels that I saw with King Fountain. So um, every writer wonders, is the best book I wrote the one that I wrote, 5 books or 10 books ago? I often wondered, is Muirwood going to be the best series that I write? And I have found that if you keep trying and keep honing your craft and keep looking for that secret sauce, diving into other books and seeing what's working, that you can create something that is still relevant and makes readers very passionate about it. So I don't think my best work's behind me. I think it's still ahead of me, and I love I love what I do every day. I tell people that the worst day being an author is still better than the best day I had while I was at Intel. And so I don't regret for a moment making the switch.
I can see that, Jeff. And do you know what? There's an infectious enthusiasm for you. This is genuinely quite uplifting talking to you about writing. So it's brilliant to have you on. Just to bring things to a conclusion then, and a great story, and like I say, inspiring. Also, I love the way that you've got this spider's web of different deals and stuff. And why not? Why would you not think what's the right thing for this particular product and so on? So advice then for authors starting out today, faced with quite a competitive self-published environment and published environment. Is there anything you would say to somebody, perhaps in my position, sort of just ahead, hopefully, of publishing their first book?
That's a wonderful question, and it's the question we all want answered. And I spent many times, trolling authors' websites to learn about their stories. I got to spend a day with Terry Brooks in Northern California several years ago, before this all happened, and got to hear his advice. And as he was teaching to all of us budding authors and things, and so I have kind of two angles that I take the advice. The first traditional advice, which I got from Terry Brooks, and he attributes this quote to Stephen King, although I haven't found it in any of Stephen's writings, but I don't want to claim it for myself. That after you've written your first million words, then you're ready to start
Right.
the process, and that can sound so daunting.
Yeah.
Yet, after I heard that from Terry, I went back and I pulled out some of those manuscripts from high school, those printed out manuscripts on a dot matrix printer that sounded like nails on a chalkboard as it was printing. This is back, during the 80s. I pulled that out and I just started, okay, how many words per page do I have on these? And I just averaged those. And then the things I wrote during college, I put that all together. And it was like 980,000 words. And the very next thing I wrote, because after I added that up, the very next thing I wrote was The Wretched of Muirwood,
Wow.
which is the book that made all this happen. So there is some wisdom. And if you look at Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, he talks obviously about the 10,000 hour principle. And I think for authors, we need, maybe it's not 10,000 hours, but it's a million words. We need that practice. And it's not just, it's not just writing, but it's reading too. It's the analyzing of what works and what doesn't work. So that's the kind of practical side that I like to give, that you really do need to practice, that you don't become good at anything. My son's a very gifted pianist, and we have to tell him to stop playing sometimes because he wants to practice all the time, and he's so much better than me now. So that practice is crucial. There are stories of an author whose first book hits that international success. It's just so rare. I think for 99% of the rest of us, that practice is important.
Yeah.
The other the other practical advice that I like to give is the things that I wish I had known when I started. Things like having a dev editor, things like having good proofreaders, finding excellent cover artists. All of those tools that all the publishing houses use are available to you and to me. And that if you like that don't we all look at the bestsellers on Amazon in your genre, and you can go find out who did that cover art. It's printed in the book, and you can go find who these people are. And some of my top selling books, the King Fountain series, Amazon Publishing hired one of the top cover artists for that, and they did an amazing job because that is super important. Now you can have great cover and horrible content, so that's why we need dev editors and we need copy editors, we need proofreaders. And I have a team, I have a mastermind that of people that read and help me with my books. It's not all just coming from Jeff's brain, but the people like my sister and my daughter and my editor and all this team of first readers that I have that get the first peek at what I do. That's so important to have a team together, to not feel like you're the only person in that box. So get that team together, even if you haven't had success yet. Pull together that team who are passionate about that story that you want to tell. And I think that all of that is only going to make it more palatable for editors and agents down the road to take a look at it.
Great. The not so secret source of success is hard work and application.
Yes.
Who knew?
Exactly.
Jeff, it's been really wonderful talking to you. Honestly, I do feel it's you're infectious with your enthusiasm, and your approach is spot on. I can see why your overnight success has happened over a period of 20 years, which is always the case with overnight successes. But well done. Yes. We bathe in the reflected glory of where you are now, and there's a legacy. That's a great thing about writing these books. There's a legacy for your family in the future as well, and many more books to come. I'm not trying to age you prematurely. So.
No, I people say, how many more books are you going to write? I have still not run out of ideas, and new ideas inspire me all the time. I got invited to China last year with my Chinese publisher and with the government. It does an international writing festival, and they said, come on out. And I got to spend a month in Beijing and Shanghai, and if that was not inspiring, that was inspiring. So just the people you meet every day, you never know when they might be a character in a book. So thanks for having me on. It was great to be here.
Superb. Thanks, Jeff.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
There you go. Jeff Wheeler there in the early days. But we should reiterate what I said in last week's episode, having just spoken to Lindsay Baroka, who launched a brand new pen name a couple of years ago and was a bit worried by all the people saying you can't do it anymore. It's much, much more difficult to launch into this environment. It's much more competitive, and she did it and made money. And hopefully I'm going to be doing that soon, and people listening to this should understand that this is a growing market, a voracious market of readers, which is growing at the same time as, yes, more writers are coming on as well.
Yeah, of course it's possible. People who say it isn't talking out of their backsides. It's never been easier. When I started, we didn't have half the tools that we've got now. Even for things like Vellum, on the convenience side to the advertising platforms we can take advantage of. So no, there's no question that, as someone may have said on a podcast, there's never been a better time to be a writer. So no, I'm not buying that for a moment.
Excellent. Okay, look, this is going out on the 1st of November. We should say that we are going to record a live episode of this podcast in Las Vegas. So even if you're not going to 20 books, actually, you could probably come along. I'm sure you could come along to Sam's Town Gambling Hall and Casino Resort or something it's called, but I'm sure if you're in Vegas, you know what Sam's Town is, just north of the Strip. And we're going to be doing that on Wednesday, the 13th of November at around 6 o'clock. If you get there a little bit early, you'll get a drink, which is always good, and you will watch us having a bit of fun making a live episode of the podcast. If you can come along, say hello, we'd love to see you there. We could be overwhelmed. I need to talk to Sam's Town and make sure there's a limit behind the bar. I don't want to.
I'll be overwhelmed about attendees. I'll be overwhelmed in any event, but yes, we could also be overwhelmed in terms of the number of people who come.
Yeah, well, we'll probably go for 4 figures behind the bar, so we'll be up for a few drinks.
Well, the record is Nink holds the record, so I think there's a fairly good chance we'll beat that.
Yeah, Nink was that was a busy night, only getting busier. Great. Well, look, thank you very much indeed, Mark, the Bearded Wonder. Do you remember who the Bearded Wonder was?
Kenny Everett.
No, it was on Test Match Special. Bearders. Oh. He was the statistician, and Johnston always called him the Bearded Wonder.
Right.
Look, next week is.
You may be the only person in the world who knows that.
Yeah, I bet I'm not. I reckon Steve Moore knows that because he's a bit of a cricket guy as well. Episode 199 next week. And then it's the big 200 after that. What are we going to do for the 200?
I don't know. I have to think about that. I think we may have a two-way, so to speak. So yes, no guest perhaps that week. We might do something just me and you.
Well, let's have a little think about the highlights, our personal highlights from the podcast. We look back at the interviews, and then we can talk about.
It's going to take a while.
How
long have I got?
Dig out a highlight. Let's talk about what we've learned from the podcast. There you go.
I haven't learned anything. What have you learned?
You must have learned some things from some people.
I have.
You said you learned something from Lucy's score.
I did, but that wasn't on the podcast. That was at a high-level author retreat. But no, I've learned lots. I've learned lots of things.
By the way, you have to wish me luck, because in a drunken moment in Florida, I thought it'd be a good idea to interview Lucy Score and 3 other female billionaire collaborators. Female billionaire romance is kind of a niche I think they've invented. And Lucy's just launched her first book. She launched it whilst we're in. So I've got all 4 of them on at the same time on a colossal Zoom feed. And I'm probably going to be eaten alive.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky. So if I'm still here next week, that'll be a bonus. So I've got them to come soon, and that will be a good episode. First time we've had a 5-way.
God. Sorry, folks. I apologise for my erstwhile broadcast colleague.
Look, we'll see you in Las Vegas if you can make it. That'll be great. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next Friday for another episode of the Self-Publishing Show. Don't forget you can sponsor us or chip in and help the podcast and be rewarded in return if you go to patreon.com/self-publishing show. And until next week, I think it's going to be a goodbye from him.
And a goodbye from me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishing show. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.